Hi, my name is Whitfield and I'm a teacher, and I just love teaching and learning. I do, and I know that sounds a little bit cheesy and maybe a little contrived, but for me it's the truth. I literally wake up every morning and get paid to do what I love, and that's pretty cool. I've had an amazing career so far. It definitely hasn't been the normal pathway for teachers, but the reward for me has been the adventures that come with that road less travelled. So let's just start from the beginning. I was born in Victoria, then I grew up in a small town in New Zealand. I went to primary school, I was homeschooled for a few years, went back to high school, went to a whare wānanga in New Zealand, did a tōhirana Māori, which is an Indigenous degree. Then I went and did mainstream teacher training. So by the time I started teaching, I'd experienced quite a range of educational settings, and that made me see teaching and learning as something quite broad and full of possibility and diversity. I guess for me the scope of what learning could be and what learning is was huge. This is valuable because I went into international teaching. I lived and worked for 4 years in Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea, and then for 4 years in Shanghai, China. And in that time I got to work with amazing teachers from all over the world who had such different skill bases. And I also had the most beautiful students from diverse cultures. Like in one school we had over 50 nationalities. After that I moved to Australia. I completed a Masters in Education by Research here at USC. It was a comparative qualitative study where I explored teacher transition pathways into the profession. And towards the end of my Masters I started tutoring at uni here. And that is my main role here at USC. I'm a tutor across a suite of programs in the School of Education. I'm also part of the International Projects Group. Since 2010 I've designed and delivered professional development workshops on campus here for Papuan teachers, and more recently I've begun travelling to Papua as part of the IPG project that's raising educational capacity of teachers and principals in Papua. I've also designed and delivered workshops for C-Salt for the Professional Development Days for Sessional Staff, and these workshops are focused around active learning. The reason I'm telling you this is because in my experience it doesn't matter what culture, what language, what country, what age, whether it's primary, secondary, tertiary, or even practicing professionals. Across all of these settings there's been one consistent need that stood out to me, and that is learners need to be engaged. Regardless of the context, learners need to be engaged. In 2005, Mark Pransky wrote this really interesting article called Engage Me or Enrage Me. It was a little bit controversial, but I loved it because it challenged teachers and educators to consider, if our students are not engaged, what are they? Are they disengaged? Are they misengaged? Are they enraged, as Pransky suggests? Learners need to be engaged. In universities in Australia and across the world, we face lots of issues around things like student retention and attrition, where we have students dropping out of courses. We face issues around student attendance, where we have them enrolled in courses but they're not coming. And this impacts on their ability to learn, their success in assessment, and also their efficacy in themselves as learners, professionals, and people. And I believe engagement is a key element in addressing these issues, because learners need to be engaged. At USC, our strategic priorities talk about things like supporting a diverse student population and providing a high quality student experience. They talk about things like supporting diverse teaching and learning in order to maximise student participation and success. To maximise student participation and success, the students, our learners, need to be engaged. But engagement is just not that simple, because engagement is not entertainment, it's more than that. And engagement is not accidental, it's strategic. So when I began to think about my video response, I thought about how I focus my teaching strategically to engage the learners, and how I actually have steps around this in terms of the planning, the delivering, the reflection, and the improving of my teaching. And so over the years I've developed this model. It's a framework for engaging learners, and it has 7 steps in the planning, delivering, reflecting, and improving process. And I call it the Teaching for Engagement model. So the first element in my teaching for engagement model is course knowledge, and I break that down into 3 things. Firstly, course structure. That's knowing what the course is and knowing how it's structured, and also knowing why. Why is the learning sequenced in this way? And when you understand why the learning is sequenced, it just gives you that insight into how, foundational insight into how to better teach for it. The second part is understanding the assessment. What is the assessment? When is it occurring? Why is it occurring then? What's being assessed? And the third part of course knowledge is that reading around the content. And obviously we all have a certain amount of knowledge and professional experience, that's why we've been employed here. But just improving our currency, I just love to get out there and see who's talking about it, who's writing about it, what's new, and just adding layers of currency to my existing knowledge and professional experience. The second element in teaching for engagement is having a learning focus. And this is where you focus on the learning, not on the personal. And the thing that's so liberating about this is that when you focus on the learning can be challenged. It can be agreed upon, disagreed upon. People can critically analyze it. People can contest it. People can discuss it. And it just opens the door for just more critical analysis, problem-based learning, and all kinds of diverse approaches to the learning. Which brings me to my next element. So the third element in teaching for engagement is diverse approaches, and this is about having diverse learners with diverse learning preferences, and there's lots of ways to do this. I tend to lean towards Fleming, VAC, visual, oral and kinesthetic learners, or Gardner's multiple intelligences, but I love the idea of andragogy, which is adult learning, in partnership with active learning. Andragogy says that adult learners are self-directed and come to our learning environments with a lot of experience, and I find that having diverse active learning activities ignites those elements in our adult learners. It ignites self-directed learning and it ignites the use of past experience. So the fourth element in teaching for engagement is adding professional relevance, and this is where we add that layer of authenticity. It's like that real life workplace relevance to what we teach, and in a way I like to think about it as supersizing the learning, like value adding, because we already have this content that we have to teach, and it's just adding this layer of professional relevance to it. I think it's really important in engaging learners because for them it gives them the rationale for learning it, gives them the purpose, and in a way it begins that transition into their professions. So the fifth element in teaching for engagement is about creating a safe learning space. And this can be about environment. For example, setting up your room in a way that nobody has their back to you. It can be about respect, like who's speaking, who's listening. And it can be also about codes of conduct. For example, one course I teach on, the lecturer Natalie McMaster has a code of conduct practice called Tribes. So the sixth element in teaching for engagement is about communicating. It's about our words, planning what we're going to say. This could be reflective questions. It could even be questioning sequences. But it's as much about our words as it is about our bodies. For example, smiling, letting your learners know that everything's okay, opening up your body, using open hands, not pointing, eye contact, looking around the room, moving around the room, making yourself present in the room. These are all ways that we can engage learners. So the seventh and final element in teaching for engagement is authenticity. And this is about being yourself, being true to yourself when you teach. I call it teaching in truth. And my own personal philosophy in the way I teach in truth is that I consider the ripple effect of what I'm doing. It's almost immeasurable because when I teach one teacher, I impact thousands of students. When I teach 100 teachers, hundreds of thousands of students, and I take this really seriously. And in a way, it just gives my job such purpose. And for this reason, when I teach authentically, I'm committed to excellence. And for me, that excellence is engaging learners.